Conversations podcast.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of Conversations podcast. Today, I have with me Associate Professor Marc Orlando from Macquarie University. Hello, Marc. How are you?
Good morning. Very well, Fatih. Thanks for having me. And by the way, great initiative, so keep up with the good work.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction to our viewers and listeners about you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Currently, Associate Professor Marc Orlando is the Director of the Translation and Interpreting Program at Macquarie University. And I have to say, congratulations on your new position there, Marc.
Thank you.
He's also the coordinator of the Research Committee of AIIC, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And he's also a member of the NAATI Technical Reference and Advisory Committee. And before joining Macquarie University, Marc also worked at Monash University for 12 years in the Translation and Interpreting Studies department there. So hello again, Marc, and tell us, what drew you to Macquarie University? Congratulations again on your new position there as the director.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for mentioning this. So yeah, I joined Macquarie at the end of July this year. What drew me there? Look, 12 years at Monash, as you said, and I don't know. I had the feeling maybe it was time for a new chapter. This position, was advertised, and it sits in a very interesting area. It's Macquarie University has had this TNI program for many years. Interestingly, it sits in the Faculty of Medicine, Health and Human Sciences, which gives, very different types of opportunities for interdisciplinary work. And so working with colleagues from, health, medicine, psychology, cognitive sciences, audiology, speech pathology, instead of, always colleagues working in arts, which is, of course, a very interesting links for TNI as well. But yeah, and look, yeah, it was time. I think it was time to move on and embark in a new adventure. And this one is quite exciting, actually.
Well, I find it fascinating that the translation and interpreting departments at universities, they're always in different schools and colleges. At first, I was like, I wonder why this is happening. Why don't they just belong to a single school? But then I saw the advantages of it. Like you said, every university has it linked to another school, which then provides a whole bunch of different research opportunities for the academics there, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly that. And again, most of the TNI programs in the world are generally within the humanities or arts or communication studies as well. In this specific case, in Macquarie's case, it's quite unique, that it's been attached to the Faculty of Medicine and Health and Human Science and Cognitive Science. I find that very, very interesting. But you're right. It definitely, whichever school it sits in, it's the potential for interdisciplinary research and teaching as well is interesting, and that's what universities are interesting, about as well. If you look 40 years ago, TNI programs were sort of independent training schools, and little by little, with the Bologna process and everything, they've been merged into universities with expectations for research. But so some people saw that as okay, we are losing on the training part of it, on the if you want the very vocational part of it. But I think it's great for any profession, and in this case for TNI, to have an academic as well, input and using research for training and then for practicing as well. I think it's extremely important. Yeah.
And again, like you said, I find it interesting. It almost makes sense that if you think that community interpreting, especially, you do have a lot of medical interpreting, healthcare interpreting jobs in there. And for this department at this university to sit within that Faculty of Medicine, Health and Human Sciences, makes sense. But also, like you say, it's not just the universities. There are TAFEs as well that have TNI programs that are focused more on the vocational education side of things. So I think, like, compared to you would know better than me, but compared to the rest of the world, I think we have a really nice allocation within universities, different departments, as well as vocational education institutions for our TNI industry.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you. I think it's quite diverse here. You can definitely, wherever you are in your training journey as a professional TNI, you have a lot of opportunities to undertake various types of training. So in other countries you have the same sort of university academic environment, and you can have the usual academic vocational within those. I'm not exactly sure if there are the equivalent of TAFEs in other countries. I don't think so. It's now more or less everything has been merged into universities now. But yeah, interesting in any case that we have these opportunities. And I forgot to say one thing as well. You're right about community interpreting and the proximity to health in the case of Macquarie. But there is also an interesting program in sign language interpreting, in Auslan interpreting at Macquarie, one of the very few programs in Australia. And this is also very interesting because the very often the links between interpreter training and sign language interpreter training, for example, or research have not always been established. And I think it's again great to be joining a program like this one, in that respect.
Magnificent. So we'll look forward to your research within your new university. So look forward to that in the upcoming months and years, hopefully. Look, I know you're also a conference interpreter. So what does it mean to be a department head at a major university and then still having the opportunity to practice your profession as well? First of all, what kind of work is it that you take? How often do you work? And why do you think it's important for an academic to keep practicing?
Look, as you know, I'm originally from France, and then I moved to New Zealand about 18 years ago, and then to Australia 15 years ago. When I was in France, I was in the academic world. Then I left and was a practitioner for a few years, and 100% practicing in translation and interpreting, and then came back in the academia later on. And I see, of course, a huge advantage in still being a practitioner, knowing what's happening in the field, and being able to use that, sometimes as something you want to explore. If it is about research, you can realize something when you are practicing, or when you hear your colleagues talk about this or that, and you're thinking, okay, maybe that would be interesting to investigate that further. But also, and that's what I'm interested in, trying to make sure that what we do in training is definitely matching, the needs and the reality of the work. So it's quite an obvious answer in the sense that I believe that, if you really want to be able to train the next generation of TNIs, you need to know yourself, what's happening on the other side of the fence as well, which is the practical one. So in all, both my contracts at Monash or at Macquarie, I've made it clear that I want to keep practicing. So there is the potential for that. It's part of what I do. So it's part of.
Do they expect you to? They want you to?
Well, yeah, exactly. It generates research as well. It generates, some sort of momentum for different things. So that's good for the university. In any case, I've developed quite interesting links with the industry because I'm a practitioner. So it's helpful for grants. It's helpful for some types of funding. So I do about, it depends. This year has been a very weird year, as you know, but otherwise I normally do about 30 to 40 days in the booth every year. And I generally take on only conference interpreting work. I haven't done much other than that in the last few years. I did a few translation projects in the past. I've translated a few books in anthropology and things like that, but it's been quite a long time now. The last one was in 2012 actually. So I think that's the point, making sure you keep the finger on the pulse, making sure you know what's happening in the industry, and also practicing yourself. It's always good because how to do it and you still do it on a regular basis. I think the students appreciate that. Sitting in the booth with them when we are in the classroom is also something they like, and seeing you interpreting and hearing you interpreting with them is a good thing. So I think no,
I'm definitely with you there. When I was doing my studies at RMIT University as well, and I all my teachers there, they were practicing academics as well, and just to they'd be like, look, we have to have a week off today, I've got a conference somewhere, and we're like, all right, we're going to come back with lots of new stories. And you can really find the teaching so much more relatable when you have someone who not used to work, but still currently works in the field, you know?
Yeah, and it's this thing, again, I know it's probably not exactly where your question was going, but I think we need, of course, academics who are specialists in this and in that, and they may not be practitioners, and that might be fine to teach a few things. Then you may have practitioners who are only practitioners, and it's great to have them in the classroom because they bring a lot. But then having people who are able to bring both sides together around training, where training is actually and teaching is actually the important element in that, requires that you have people with a pedagogical background, with training in that, and being able to put the two worlds together is done through that interface that training offers. And I do believe it's great. It's great to have in many universities in Australia. In this case, in many programs, there are actually a few profiles like mine. And you're right. This is essential for students and for the quality of training.
For someone who has received training overseas, I did university studies in Turkey as well, and everything's so theory based in Turkey. I don't know how it was in France, for example, but I find that studying in Australia, there's a lot of practical components as well, which I really, really enjoyed. It wasn't just the theory, it wasn't just the reading, the books, the scenarios, the case scenarios. There was a lot of practical elements to it as well.
Yeah, I think this is as well due to what the discipline is, because it's a mix of vocational and academic training. You do have this possibility to have both elements too. We use theory a lot in all the programs that I know in Australia. Theory is an important component of the training, but you use that as an applied way. It's not theory for theory. It's really showing how it improves your practice, how it helps you save time to understand a few things, whether it is about cognition, whether it is about purely skill-based aptitudes or competence. And then it helps a lot. There's this thing that many researchers for many years in TNI were talking about: are we training translators and interpreters, or are we teaching translation and interpreting? And I think it's both, and it has to be both. Yes, it cannot be only vocational, because you are missing on a lot if you do that only, and it will be very limited, but it cannot be purely theoretical either. So yeah.
And just the marriage of the two, the theory, when you mix it up with the practical side of it, it actually stays with you much longer. I believe some of the theory in my previous studies, not TNI related, I would have forgotten maybe a year or two after graduating. But all the theory that I got in my TNI courses, because it was married in with the practical side of things, it really comes to you like when you're actually out there interpreting or translating, you're like, oh, hang on, that's the theory. Now I can apply that. Yep. It just really comes together once you graduate.
Exactly. And most programs as well, just to come back to exactly what you're saying, most programs in Australia are, coursework. So masters by coursework, for example, if it's a master degree. So that means that you could, at the end of your degree, undertake more research if you want to pursue research and doctoral studies. Why not? And then that's where the academic and discipline aspect and theoretical aspects are important. But most of our graduates, have to sit the NAATI test, which is very, as skill-based, and so you really need that thing. But you also need, and I'm glad that NAATI, for example, has included that now in their new testing, in their new test and certification test. There's an element of being able to reflect on the task, and I think this is what now theoretical training gives you. That sort of reflective possibility or capacity to reflect on what you're doing, on how you're doing it. Is extremely important. Yeah.
No, definitely. Look, let's talk about AIIC. You're on the research committee there. Can you please explain to our viewers what AIIC is, and also tell us a little bit about the kind of research that AIIC does, and just a little bit about the research committee there?
Yeah, so AIIC, I'm sure most of our viewers would know, but is the International Association of Conference Interpreters. The acronym is in French, so that's why it's AIIC. It was founded at in the late 50s, and it represents conference interpreters internationally. So it's a professional association, like many others, like our national associations. But this one is international, and it's quite unique in its in its nature. And interestingly, as well, for a professional association, they do have a formal research committee, which is great, because the members of the committee are all practitioners, of course, are conference interpreters, but they're all as well academics working in different universities in different areas and markets. So at the moment, we are 6 members of the committee, representing different regions and markets, and trying to make sure we play a sort of an interface role for the AIIC members, who are practicing conference interpreters, and the field of interpreting studies. So being, if you want, the go-between between the two worlds, as we more or less discussed already before, between theory and practice, but also being the gatekeeper somehow of the association, the association's research endeavor. The association is interested in things about improving the profession, or working for the profession, and research is extremely important for that. The problem is that we cannot undertake research for the association, so we simply act as gatekeepers. And we help for the development of some projects. One recent one was quite interesting, was on studying acoustic shocks and the problem of acoustic incidents in the world of conference interpreters. It had never been researched, it had never been investigated. We did that in partnership with an audiologist who's a Canadian audiologist working in France at the moment, and so we surveyed more than 1,000 members and ended up having quite a lot of findings and new knowledge, if you want, on what's happening with conference interpreters specifically. But not only, but specifically now that we interpreters have to work a lot online, whether it is RSI or video interpreting, you have to be extremely careful that your voice, your brain, but your ears are definitely elements you have to protect. So the health of interpreters, translators as well, but in this case for acoustic shocks and acoustics incident, that was very interesting to realize actually that it is extremely there's the prevalence of acoustic shocks among conference interpreters is very high actually.
And well, yes, definitely conference interpreters, but also community interpreters now as well.
Absolutely.
Doing a lot of video remote interpreting. I recently invested in proper headphones, after using my little headphones that came with my phone for a while. But you're right, especially if you're on there, 5, 6, 7 hours a day. And this research as well that I had a look at, I think that the one you're talking about is in Canada. They did it with the Parliament conference interpreters there, and they saw a massive rise in was it from February until November or something? There was a massive rise in acoustic shock because they were constantly now doing conference interpreting or simultaneous interpreting from home, 8-9 hours straight.
Yeah, and it's not only about doing it from home, because of course you need to make sure if you're doing this from your home studio, you have to make sure you've got a proper microphone, a proper headset, as you said, and so on and so forth. But also to make sure that even if it's from a hub, or even for those who still work on site, to make sure that people are users, speakers, and interpreters. Everyone understands that there is some equipment that you need to invest in, to make sure you are well heard, but also, as we just said, yes, that your ears are protected and so on and so forth. So it can be for in the booth as well. It's not necessarily at home, but now, of course, we have.
But I was saying, especially for the community interpreters working from home these days, which they have been doing a lot of, I think, it might not cost a lot of money to set something up that's good, has all the basics that you need, doesn't have to be hundreds of dollars worth, but I think it's very important that practitioners are aware of this, what acoustic shock is, let alone having a good quality product there for the clients.
Yeah, and you're right. This project started from something which was, observed in Canada. There were a few complaints from the staff members of the Canadian Parliament of acoustic shocks and issues, and then it has then translated into, so the Parliament and the Translation Bureau in Canada is doing their own research and their own things. But AIIC then thought, okay, why not? We need to investigate this. How can we do that? An audiologist contacted us, said, look, it's been done. We've surveyed many phone centers but never conference interpreters. It would be interesting to see how it works there. And then all in all, there was a snowball effect, and then this was a great thing. But I think it shows an interesting thing about where we are going with some research, not all of it, but some research, with the interest of making sure we take care of of the health of we hear of translators and interpreters. We hear a lot about ergonomics for translators, the type of desk that you have, the type of chair that you have.
It's
and
work
same with
health
interpreters
safety
now.
issue, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think it's essential, that, but it had never, no one had ever thought about that before and talked about that before, So it's interesting that there is quite a lot of research done on voice management, for example, for interpreters, on stress management for interpreters and translators and interpreters in particular, on now audiology as well. So all these elements on cognition as well, making sure that, working, for example, from home in RSI, the cognitive load we know is different. The impact on the interpreters is different. And even if sometimes we do not have the findings in research showing that, there is at least a perception from interpreters that they are suffering, or that they are, it's much worse to work from home and from video than on site. So you need this research to be done to make sure that we get you get the right findings. So it's interesting that there is this big focus on the human at the moment, because there's a lot of research in TNI which is also about technology, about the non-human, or some people have talked quite a lot about sort of dehumanization of our professions, and
are we going to lose our jobs? Are the machines going to take over?
All this, exactly, all this this spiel that we hear here and there. I think it's important to definitely be careful and know what's happening with technology, and I think this is one of the things we can also probably touch upon today. But it's interesting to see that there's a lot of research on this, on AI, on neural machine translation, on the type of technology that can help and enhance what we're doing. But there's also, interestingly, quite a lot of research on the human, on the health of interpreters and translators, as we said, but also on the human value of recruiting an interpreter instead of a machine, probably in the future, or whatever. But yeah, no, I think the human value is also it's threatened, but at the same time it's in the spotlight again, which is good.
Well, like you said, within regards to the humanization and a lot of investment on the human part of the interpreting and translation, there is a lot of self-care. There is a lot of self-care mentally and physically that has to be taken into consideration, especially for the interpreter. Everything is about your body and well-being, isn't it? From your ears to your voice, to your mental well-being, everything has to be 100% for you to go and perform. It's not like we have tools that we can trust. These are our tools.
Exactly. And you're
right. Without them, we don't exist.
And you're right. I know that, for example, 10 years ago, when we were training, interpreters, we very rarely mentioned those things. We always said the essential, which is still true. You have to maintain your linguistic and cultural, knowledge at the right level and be proficient and this and that. And then you have to prepare extremely well before any assignment. So preparation and the linguistic and cultural proficiency are part of the things. And having been trained and being able to do the task. But now, when we teach and train, we also take all this into consideration. Be careful that be careful with your body, with who you are, with your you're absolutely right. So again, health is an interesting component of that. Yeah.
So we're talking about technology in TNI. Do you think that machine translation or robot interpreting is actually going to completely take over? I mean, what is the value of AI and technology in TNI, and what is the value of the human being? Do you think we are at risk?
Well, I think the professions as we knew them and as we know them, from before, are definitely changing, and so it's probably and certainly not the end of these professions. I think you will still need, for a long time, the right person to be able to, bridge, different cultures, different languages, different people to communicate, and so on and so forth. We know this, and it's here to stay, I suppose. Now, the value of technology cannot be, underestimated either. When you, in translation, for example, when you can have an output of, 5,000 words a day instead of the 1,500 that you usually do, you cannot, ignore that, and you cannot say, oh, but it's done by machine, and it cannot, So we have to, I think, take things as they come. We have to make sure that we use them. So I do not believe in the death of our professions, but more in the changes of our profession. So everyone, I think, more or less agrees on the fact that technology can enhance the work that we do as translators or interpreters, and simply we need to make sure that we train people to use the right technology the right way. But that also means training the users of the services that we can offer. And if you have to translate something very repetitive that a machine translation will do very well, and you can simply add a bit of post-editing on it, so be it. At the same time, there are still pieces that will really require the human touch in translation, and from literary translation to some marketing, to some localization, to some you will need the human touch, where your knowledge in the culture, in the local culture as well, sometimes in the market and things will make the difference, and machines will probably not be able to get this. As for AI in interpreting, when you see the way, and I think it's Microsoft mixing different pieces of text-to-speech technology with AI as well, and with machine translation, you can definitely create interesting alternatives. But again, for what? And what is the risk if you do that? What do you want to achieve? I think it is simply that if it's an easy translation, if it's an easy thing to be even translated orally, maybe some machines will do it, and without a human input. But I think for everything that counts, the human value will not disappear. But as I said, I think we need to make sure that we use the technology properly, that we train people to use it properly, and that we also explain our roles and what we do to the users of our services. But there's nothing really new under the sun here. If you look at the way people move from consecutive interpreting with just a pen and a notepad to the use of simultaneous interpreting and booths and consoles and microphones, the shift in the 40s and later on was not easy either. Those who were the consecutive interpreters, and so that new technology as a bizarre thing, and no, that's not going to work. Look where we are now. We are doing this from home, and again, 5 years ago, most interpreters would tell you, no, doing conference interpreting from home, no way. We're doing it. It's not ideal, it's not good, but at least you can still do the thing. So I think, the long answer to your question, sorry Fatih, just simply, I think, making sure we know how to use that, and there is this complementarity between human and machine. Knowing the technology the right way is probably it gives access to new things as well. I think there are.
It's inevitable though, isn't it? Especially at this day and age where technology is a big part of our lives. I mean, we can't just take what we want. You've got your iPhones and you've got, your electric cars, everything's happening. But then all of us, you still want to say, well, the interpreting side of it or the translation side of it, we still want to keep it very traditional. Like you said, in the 40s and 50s, there was a big transition, especially with conference interpreting. And well, that was like 80 years ago now. wasn't it?
Yeah.
So I think we're due for another change. You look at the software developers like Zoom, all of a sudden, within weeks after the pandemic, they started introducing the interpreting software. So, splits up the channels on your headphones, and it was like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
And I think I read once, I can't remember exactly who said it, but, interpreters and translators won't be taken over by technology, but they will be taken over by interpreters and interpreters and translators who use technology well.
Yeah, it is definitely one of the saying of at the moment around, and I think it's exactly that. I think it's exactly true. I read an interesting piece the other day on whichever social media. Someone was not comparing, but was saying, look at bakers. They've been here for hundreds of years. Look at people who write for other people. We used to have scribes, centuries ago. You still need people to write for other people, from a novelist to a pressy writer to a speech writer. So it's just, I think it's simply, bakers. Bakers used to bake certain way, centuries ago, and we still have bakers now who can definitely work in a very creative way as well. So I think it's to know what your job is about, what you're doing, and to bring in, with the technology that we have, to bring in your own little thing on it, and invest in the right facet of the profession. Probably, maybe some facets will disappear. Again, as I said, there are some translations. I don't know in your language pairs, but in the languages that I know, which are mainly European languages, when you look at what machine translation can do, it's quite good.
Oh,
and it's quite good.
It's very good. Yeah.
And you can simply, if you train people, post-edit, pre-edit and post-edit, and then format, because they're all the typesetting and the formatting is extremely important as well. But you can still provide the service, and you still need a human behind that. So I think it's just simply accepting that you are not going to do the same task every day as you used to, but you will our jobs will be multifaceted. You will be using, for translation, we've just talked about it, but in interpreting, you will be doing one job from home, then a job on site, and then another job, from a hub, and then back on site, and I think it's much more open than it was, and probably more multifaceted in many ways. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a big responsibility that lies with department heads like yourself and universities, that we do need to train candidates and students with these technologies,
and practitioners. So professional associations, short courses, CPD, and things.
Sure.
We need to make sure that everything is on offer, so that everyone can definitely upskill and upgrade, when needed.
Otherwise, there's going to be a big gap. And then, you're going to have a whole bunch of interpreters that are going to be like traditionalists and that won't know how to use the technology. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of new interpreters, or who have developed themselves, that do use technology very well. And then you're going to have this big gap. So I think what you said is very true. In addition to universities and tertiary institutions, yes, there also needs to be a lot of CPD. So, call out to all the professional development institutions there.
Yeah, and we should not forget that our clients, those who require our services, from the private client to government, they're also aware of what's happening around. So they are sometimes misinformed, and so they think, oh my God, I can use that technology, that's going to do it for me. So this is our role as well, to make sure that we do say no to the use of technology, because it's here to stay, and people know that it exists, and clients know that it exists. So it's their right to ask a question at some stage and say, okay, can you provide this, me with this within 24 hours, or with that type of service? And if translators and interpreters say no because they do not know how to use the technology, or they don't want to use the technology, this is a problem. We should never forget that we are in a service industry, and as in a service industry, you have to take into account, the wishes of the client. It's your duty and your role, however, to explain to them, the risk if you do that, or how you can really improve your act and things if we work this way or that way. So I think there's a lot as well that is often not done by the professionals to explain to the clients and the users how to improve. It's not a one-way ticket. It's definitely something. It's a relationship, and you have to make sure you have that relationship. On going well, to make sure you get the best service possible. I think.
And it's just about the evolution of the industry as well, isn't it? I mean, you look now. I mean, I foresee that telephone interpreting within the next few years will be very, very minimal. You know, I think
it should be gone. I always say the same thing. Telephone is something of the 20th century. I can't even imagine that not everyone, you know, I mean, everyone should be using a video interpreting now when we can't do it on site. You know,
I think this, if there's one good thing out of this pandemic, we are now seeing more and more video remote interpreting being used, especially in community interpreting as well. So, you know, there is probably that at least one positive thing that we've gained from this pandemic. Look, Marc, thank you so much for your time today. I just want to ask you, I know you're in Melbourne. I know that we just recently got our freedom given back to us. We can travel further than 5Ks, 25Ks now. We can go within our state anywhere that we like in Victoria. So what does Marc Orlando do when he's not interpreting, when he's not running a department at Macquarie University, and that now that he's got all this freedom again? And I know that recently, congratulations, you just became a grandfather in January as well. So what do you do on the weekends when it's a lovely day?
So you mentioned that. So one thing that I've always done, you know, when I'm not interpreting or working at uni is spend, you know, quality time with my 3 kids, my wife, and now 1 grandkid. So we would definitely do that. Cooking is one of the things that I do every day. You know,
being a Frenchman, I think that's
I'm not sure if it's the case for every one of them, but definitely this is something I've been doing for forever, and I really enjoy. Otherwise, you know, a beautiful day like today could be seen playing tennis, or, you know, and when it's a bit more rainy, squash and tennis. I'm a racket person, so interested in those areas. So yeah, that's what I do when I'm not.
What did you think about Roland Garros this summer? I mean, with you had sub spectators in there, I think. You know,
I think they had 1,000 a day or something.
Yeah. What did you think? Have you been to Roland Garros?
It's been bizarre. I've never been to Roland Garros, actually. You know, it's interesting. I've been, like many of us, you know, very often to the Australian Open. I've even interpreted at the Australian Open, actually, for players. Never been to Roland Garros. Look, what was fantastic was simply the victory of one of the most incredible sports.
You haven't missed Earth, much. You know? It's just Nadal again and again.
But with the manner, I'm sorry, you know, with the manner.
Definitely. Marc, thank you so much.
Thank you
for your
very
time
much
today.
for the invitation. Anytime, you know, that was a pleasure. And as I said to you, great initiative.
Thank you.
So, well done.
Thanks very much. All the best. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.
All Graduates Conversations Podcast.